So now that we know a couple of the whys for why you'd use an SOP, I'm going to walk you guys through parts of an SOP, and we're actually going to cover 6 parts here today. The first part of a customer service SOP is going to be the purpose. So purpose might be self-explanatory. The problem is a lot of people, a lot of business owners, when they're actually putting these SOPs in place, they gloss over the purpose part. Purpose is essential. You're going to want to include a purpose within the SOP, because if you don't, the issue is, one, it's going to be harder for you to actually come up with what to put in the SOP. But two, while a rep is on the phone, you don't want them, constantly digging around while they're, juggling a phone call, to be looking through and trying to figure out, and kind of reading through a bunch of jargon to get to the point of what an SOP is, or what SOP is actually to be used in that situation. You want a simple purpose, a title, a header, something with a good amount of keywords that can tell a rep, this is what you need to be referring to in this moment. It's essential that you include a purpose within the SOP. So just an example of an SOP, I got one here. Your customer service team is working to improve canned responses, let's say, right? A purpose for the SOP should be questions asked more than 3 to 5 times per day. So let me give you a quick example of what a purpose would look like. Let's say you're putting an SOP together. What the purpose of the SOP is? The purpose of the SOP, this SOP, is to decrease response time by expanding our internal list of canned responses. We'll get into canned responses later, but that, as an example, is the purpose of the SOP. Now, the next integral part of an SOP is the scope. Just like if you're a service business, you might have a scope of work with your client written into a contract or maybe signed off, and that's going to determine and govern the scope and the actual the boundaries and guidelines of your engagement with that particular client. Just like you have that, it's integral that you include a scope within an SOP, so a customer service rep knows whether that particular SOP will apply or does not apply in a certain given situation, in any given situation. So I'll give you an example of a scope, right? So the scope of this SOP, let's say the one we put together earlier in the purpose, which is the canned responses. The scope of this SOP is simply only for new queries related to product X that we have, for X product that we have. And you might put together different SOPs based on things like what kind of shipping the customer used, what the location of the customer is, whether they're, domestic or an international customer. So these scopes will kind of dictate and also help you organize different SOPs together, right? Because the purpose and the scope actually will help you do this. Where if you have a kind of a mini Wikipedia, or kind of a database of SOPs that your team uses, having good purposes and scopes within these SOPs is going to help you kind of organize those better and make sure that reps can actually get to them when they need them. So, of course, if you don't have somebody responsible for what actually has to happen within the SOP, nothing's going to happen, because people are just going to say, oh, well, I didn't know that was my responsibility. Somebody else should have taken care of it. It's very critical that you include exact roles in terms of who is actually going to be responsible. The responsibility is the next part of the SOP. Who is going to be responsible for a given item, for a given query, for a given customer concern. Very, very essential that you include responsibility into the SOP. Make sure you know exactly which role, whether it's a level 1, 2, or 3 customer service rep, whoever is going to be included, whoever is the responsible party, make sure to include them. And also, we're going to go into escalations in a little bit, but escalations are an essential part as well. So if, let's say, a call comes into a level 1 rep, maybe it needs to go to a level 2 rep, right? Maybe it's outside of their kind of wheelhouse, the customer concern. So you need to make sure you have a flow, and we're going to go over again how to actually put together what's called an escalation matrix later on in this video. But having a procedural kind of flow for who is responsible for a given customer concern is essential. Again, we'll go over escalations in just a little bit. Now, the next part is definitions. Definitions are important because you don't want, customer service reps to have kind of access to information where they're, walking through kind of a document, an SOP, and they see some jargon on there and there's no definition for what that jargon actually means. What I would recommend is, if you're using something like Google Docs, make sure you have links. Make sure you have like a glossary or definition section, again, of the SOP, and make sure you link keywords that might be a little bit, hard to understand, maybe some internal jargon or abbreviations you have. Make sure you link those to the actual glossary or definition section of the SOP, so that there's no kind of confusion about what certain words mean. Very, very important. So now we're actually going to get to the essential part of a standard operating procedure, and that is the procedure part. What I would recommend is, if you are a smaller business, maybe less than 10 employees, I would recommend you put together first a flow chart. A flow chart is going to be a very simple way, and even very large companies, from our experience, use flow charts as standard operating procedures, at least for training purposes. What a flow chart allows you to do is visualize a flow. It helps you visualize, okay, if a customer has a concern, well, do they already have an account with us? Yes or no? You can kind of map that out. All right, so if yes, we need to do this. If no, we need to do this, right? Okay, they have an account with us. Do they have a credit card on file? No or yes? Yes, they do. This is the next flow. No, they don't. This is the next flow. So what a flow chart allows you to do is visualize kind of the procedures that have to go on. And what I'd recommend you do is, again, put a flow chart together, and then you can actually build out a kind of a written SOP based on the flow chart. That's usually the best way to do it. And I'll give you an example of a procedure as well, right? So let's say a customer service rep will enter given new queries into a spreadsheet, right? And again, this is the purpose of this SOP, is that we want to improve and increase our list of CAN responses. So the procedure: 1, the customer service rep, they're going to enter new queries into a given spreadsheet. 2, then the manager is going to review those queries and enter any queries asked more than, let's say, 3 to 5 times in the day into the list of new canned responses. Simple 2-part procedure, but what that does is it gives you a simple framework. Now note, we also included the manager on here, right? So it's also essential that in the responsibility section, the third part of the SOP, that you're also making sure that comes down to the procedure as well, right? So if there's multiple roles involved in something, make sure that that is kind of accounted for, that hey, this part of the SOP or these steps are the responsibility of the service rep. These steps are the responsibility of the manager. Essential. Now, the last part is references. If there are any references that you need to include, things like, documents, PDF, videos, any kind of web links, make sure you include those also in the references section, just so the just so the service rep, doesn't have to go through and search for those in a different database. Make sure they're linked up. So if they have any reference diagrams, if they need access to any, internal systems, make sure all of those things are included within the SOPs. Make sure they have hot links. Make sure the links are ready to go. Make sure they have logins. Make sure everything is there, so that when they're engaging with a customer on the phone, they're not spending time on things that are unnecessary and could have been avoided. Now, the examples I gave within these kind of 6 parts of an SOP, they're very basic. So, they're just meant to kind of get you thinking. So, really SOPs are kind of more involved. They take a lot of time. I mean, if you've ever hired somebody like an operations consultant to come in, maybe like a chief operating officer or something like that, they're going to make a lot of SOPs, and those SOPs are usually very, very thick documents. They're like mini novels almost. So, that's really what SOPs are. So these are just examples to kind of get the gears turning in your head. But again, essential that you include all these parts. Guys, please do like and subscribe if you found this content useful. There'll be more tips, tricks, all that kind of stuff coming out soon. Thank you so much for watching this video. Take care. Bye-bye.